Well, it's time to do a little more work on the Cobalt, the OG Cobalt, 2009 Cobalt SS. Today, I'm gonna focus on. Just doing we do have some friends out here. We got George or Georgia over here. We got more family over there, and we got some more friends over here. So they may be in the background for a little bit, but. Focusing on the 09 SS Turbo today, specifically suspension. I've had these parts and some others, excuse me, for a while now, and finally going to get some of the stuff installed. So, ZZP Performance coilovers, front, rear. Also have ZZP Performance rear sway bar, and this is more of a maintenance item, and I guess you say this is more drivetrain than maybe suspension, but I do have front hubs to put on because of the bearings, specifically passenger side. Starting to go on this, so need to get that replaced. If I could just do it at the same time. Do have some other parts also. We got some shifter, short throw shifter bearings, springs, couple things we'll do on another video. Also have, what else do I have? Oh, the intercooler stuff. Larger intercooler and all the intercooler piping. So that's another thing we're going to do coming up here before the cold weather gets here. But just kind of a quick update on this one. It is currently sitting on stock springs and very worn out struts. So if we come down here and kind of get a general view of what the front looks like sitting on the original equipment stuff. Sits definitely a little too high in the front for my liking. I mean everything can obviously be lower, but definitely a little too high in the front. And you see the back. That's the big one on these guys. It's kind of ridiculous. This is the. I'll try to get here as close as I can to the wall. That's the back. So you can see. I mean, there's huge gap on the rear. These cars do have the beam style rear suspension, which is less than ideal, but it is what it is. But that being said, they just got these things sitting so high from the factory. I do think this car might have had something else on it at some point. It might have had coilovers or some lowering suspension or something. And then because I was the second or third owner, and I think it was the third owner. If I remember the history, when I bought this, first owner had it for a long time. My guess probably kept it kind of stock. And there was another owner who bought it. I think he did a couple mods to it. Then when I got it, I think they kind of converted it back to stock. But anyway, so one thing I did do is go around and measure all four corners as it sits right here. This driveway is not perfect, but it really is as good as I can get as far as level. It's not level this way. The car is definitely sitting like this. But that's because the driveway slopes. But I think it's relatively even as far as ignoring this side slope. I think otherwise it's relatively level this way and any crossway. So using this for reference, I do go around all four corners and just measure from the ground up to the center of the wheel well. And here are the numbers. Left front 26 1/4. Let's do the fronts. 26 1/4, 26 3/8 on the front. Rears 27 3/8, 27 5/8. So basically, it sits about 1/4 inch, between 1/8 and 1/4 inch low on the driver's side. That could just be 15 years of driving it with 80% of the time only one person in the car. Who knows? But the big thing is front to back. It's like an inch higher in the back. I mean, it sits a little high in the front. It sits way high in the back. So when it comes to the coilover kit, I don't exactly have like measurements to go off of, but we're going to be figuring this out as we go. So based on what I measured, and I believe the adjustability we have in these kits, this kit, excuse me, I'd like to drop the front about an inch in the rear about 2 inches. So let's see if we can actually do that. So disassembly and replacement of the front hubs are pretty simple. This is a new GM one, pretty basic. It's got 3 bolts in the back that actually mount to the spindle. Obviously the axle goes through, and then there's, I'm guessing, probably a speed sensor. Mounts in the back. This is not actually, that is not part of it. That's just to keep the speed sensor from getting crushed. But anyway, obviously take the wheel off. 2, I think probably 1/2 inch bolts to remove the caliper. Then the rotor will come off. Then I believe probably just the sensor, and then there's just the 3 bolts in the back that take the actual old hub off, put the new one on, and then that's pretty much it. So pretty simple swap. I don't know if you can get bearings. It never seems like it, or that I know of. To get bearings just to replace that, it always seems like they sell the hubs, but it's easy enough and they're not too expensive. Although I would recommend buying a decent brand. They say don't use an impact. I wouldn't use an impact to torque it down, but you can certainly use an impact to take this off and mostly put the new axle bolt on. Sorry, I should clarify. And as far as the axle bolt itself, I don't know what size it's supposed to be. I looked online, they said 30 millimeter. It's definitely not 30. I have a couple large axle nut, or axle, what do you call these, socket. This is a 35, and I also have a 36, and then I have a 30 and 32 in just the regular impacts. So I don't know. I mean, this 35 fits on pretty good. There's a tiny wiggle. I don't know if it's really a 34 or maybe it's an SAE size, but this is what I have. Seems to work, so we're gonna go forward with it. Okay, got the old hub off here, down here. Not sure if I'm really gonna feel anything. Sorry, I'm not showing the camera there. I don't necessarily really feel anything here on the hub, but you certainly heard it in the car. When you're driving down the road, you hear that whoop, 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 whoop sound when you start turning. In this case, turning left, putting a load on the right side, you can definitely hear it. So, hub off. Pretty basic. The 3 bolts in the back here, these guys, you do have to, I had to use a wobble extension here, or whatever you call it, for one of them, especially the one on top of the axle. You could remove the 2 bolts on top of the spindle for the strut, which I'm going to do anyway. You could take that off if you were just doing the swap of the hub, but you don't necessarily have to. But I'm going to put the new one on, but I'm only going to partially reassemble. I don't think I'm going to put the caliper or the rotor on yet. It just gives me a little more room in here, especially taking these bolts off for the strut and then replacing it with the coilover. So partial reassembly here. It's all pretty straightforward, taking on and off. Get this on, get the axle torqued up, and then start, well, repeat it on the driver's side and then start going into suspension. All right, we got both hubs on, driver and passenger side. I partially put things back together, but I'm not going to do the calipers and rotors, as I mentioned. Make it a little bit easier for putting the taking these struts off and putting the new coilovers on. So overall, that job was pretty straightforward. One thing I forgot to kind of follow up on before I took all the stuff apart was, step back a little bit, kind of how the car sat with the current suspension. I did mention the height and how the rear of the car was about 1 inch higher than the front, and I have those dimensions measured up there that we'll compare to, but when we lower it. But one other thing I want to point out, I can kind of show it now, but I should have done it beforehand, was when the wheel was on the car and the car was sitting kind of in its regular riding position, I went around and checked kind of the gap of the fender from the axle. And ideally, this is just my opinion, but you can do whatever you want. I think from the axle, now obviously this is drooping real low now because there's no load on it. So if the wheel is on here, this will be up kind of right in the middle of the wheel well area around here. I'm talking about the axle portion. In my opinion, you should have kind of like a uniform gap around the whole side when the car's sitting. If anything, maybe even a tiny bit less up here if you want that kind of like lowered look. The problem was when I measured the car when it was sitting here before I jacked it up, because now it's kind of all skewed from being jacked up, but I could get basically my fat fingers, which yes, I did measure, like 3/4 of an inch roughly. I could get about 3 fingers in the top, and then it hit the tire. This is when it's sitting down on the ground. And I can only get about 2 on the sides. So that told me, at the very least, I would want 2 all the way around, so I kind of had that uniform look. Maybe even a little less than 2 on the top if I wanted a bit of a lower look. I'm not going for that whole stance thing where the front's all tucked in or bent in. I'm not doing any of that. This is more like a performance sport look. When it comes to the rear, did the same thing. I was about 2.5 fingers from the axle on the, well, I can go over here and show you. Now please ignore the gaps now because the car's jacked up, so it's really extremely gapped at the moment. But I could get about 2 to 2.5 fingers here. 2 to 2.5 fingers here. I can now get about 3, but it was about 2.5. And up top, I can get my whole fist in there now, but please ignore that. I could get about 4 when it was sitting down. So obviously the back's that much worse. So how do I equate that to lowering? It's a little tricky, but going back over the coilovers over here, if I wanted to get the uniform kind of gap all the way around on the front, I'd have to, one of my fat fingers, I'd have to be 1 lower on the top. That's about 3/4 of an inch. So that's why I said go about 1 inch in the front. And the back already sits, sorry, I'm talking to the parts here. The front sits about 1 inch lower than the back. So that's why I'm saying if I lower the front about 1 inch, that'll give a good look, and the equivalent back about 2. That's my unofficial measurement. So the bummer is I don't exactly know how to equate that to these. This is the standard lowering kit. So I think the front coilovers are the same for all the kits. They have a ton of adjustability, but in the back there's a lot less. This is called, I think, like the divorced kit or whatever. So the springs do the actual lowering. The shocks here kind of just obviously provides the dampening, and then the adjustment here on the shock is just for the maximum amount of droop, I guess you could say, under full unload, if I'm describing that right. There are some pretty good videos ZZP Performance has for install and also describing the kits that really go into a lot more detail. But all that being said, I think it's time to, unfortunately, do a bit of a guess, but let's put the, I think I'm losing light. It's probably, yeah, unfortunately. We may be only doing the front tonight, pick up the rear tomorrow, because I don't want to be doing this in darkness like I do everything else. But anyway, I think I'm going to try the fronts for now, and we're going to make a bit of a guess. You can't really judge the stock struts that length and equate it to these because they have different preload, different springs, different everything. So I'm gonna check the, I guess you call it the preload on these first. Then we're gonna take a wild guess. Right now they are set at the same top and bottom here, the same elevation, but I just don't know. I'm gonna guess and say that's what we're going with. Where is this measured at? No clue. Wild guess. But let's see. All right, I adjusted the preload on both shocks. They were a little low, or not as much as I anticipated, but basically all you do is loosen up these collars here. Take this lower one, you just loosen as far as you want. This is the locking one, and this is the adjuster one. You excuse me, you loosen it up to the point where there's no load on the shock, and then you tighten it up. So I mean, you could literally loosen beyond that so the shock's wiggling, but tighten it up so there's literally no load, they're just touching. And then from there, spin this one up and hold that position, and then crank this one tighter till you get, their website said use about 2 thickness, I think these are about 2 mil each, 2.5 mil. So you use the double thickness of the wrenches between the locking and the adjustable collar, and when you get that, then the spin locking up, and that is about 4 to 5 mil of preload on the shocks. That's what I do on the back, excuse me, front. A little different technique to do on the back. You actually do it with the spring, you jack up the back of the car. It's a little weird, but anyway, check out those videos for kind of more detailed information. But now, I don't know, I mean, this is just some random arbitrary length. I have no clue what it is. I mean, I guess I could measure it, but they line up, they appear to be the same. I don't have these tight, but I just kind of loosen them a little, or tighten them a little bit. These are the actual locking collars in the bottom, and then this piece spins, and that's actually where you lower and raise the car. So we're gonna try this. No clue where it goes, but we'll try that, get the front somewhat decent, and then go from there. All right, it is the next day, and we have front coilovers installed. So there they are. I didn't really film the install last night. It's starting to get a little dark, and to be honest, it's relatively straightforward. Basically, you have 2 bolts here that go into the spindle. The bolt itself is pressed in the nut, so you have to kind of bang it out. And the nut should come off relatively easy, unless you have your original, if you do have original struts on there, it might be a little tough. But otherwise, you have your end link for your front sway bar. That does spin, so you do need to put in the back, kind of in between the bolt and the back side, you need to put some, what do you want to call it? I just put some vice grips back there and held that, and then took it off and back on. Swap mount. I did have the brakes off, so it was a little bit easy, but put the brakes back on. There is some camber adjustments. You can actually push the spindle in a little bit, but I think that's if you want to get that kind of stance look, so I kept it out. That should be a little more straight. And then up on the top, you just have 3 studs that come up. Put 3 bolts on there. You have your adjustments here. Not going to touch them yet. See how it looks, and then ultimately, obviously, you have to get in alignment. So that's it. Driver's side and passenger side done. Next step here is going to be installing the tires, wheels and tires. Excuse me. These tires are junk. There's like no tread left, but I got new tires coming. This is just temporary here. See what kind of drop we have, because once again, as I mentioned, that setting there was just a wild guess. So I kind of feel like we're probably gonna have to adjust, but let's find out. So put some tires on here and check out what the front is, and then go to the back. All right, it's low, like really low, but didn't know it was gonna happen. And yeah, she's basically 0 gap now. If anything, a tiny bit of tuck possibly for the top of the tire. It looks cool, but not very practical for something that's gonna be driven on the street most of the time. So yeah, and then look at the back. This is settled. This is putting the wheels on, kind of driving it back and forth to get the suspension to settle a little bit. That is that's what we came up with the adjustments. So a little too much. Unfortunately, we're gonna have to bring the front up a little bit, partially so it can drive and be good on the street, and also because there is no way get the back, which yes, that is how it looks. There's no way I'm going to get that back down anywhere near to match. So we'll leave the front as is for now, and we'll get the back lower, see what we can get, and then unfortunately bring the front up a bit just to kind of match close. Okay, on to the rear suspension here. And these Cobalts do have that beam style rear suspension, which is not ideal, but man, they managed to make them work pretty well, at least on the SS models. So anyway, in the rear, you can see the beam going back here. It's just kind of like a big giant C. It has a bit of a flex to it side to side. There is a sway bar kind of tucked underneath. Otherwise, you literally just have a shock and a spring. Let me see, kind of back there, there's a spring, there's the shock. So I think it's 18 and a 21 millimeter. Take the shock off. Then you can, I have a jack under the beam right now, putting a little bit of pressure on the suspension. But once the shock comes off, you can drop the beam down. That should loosen up the spring, swap out the springs. I don't know, I might just try the spring only, see how good or bad it looks, and then I don't know, go from there, but we'll see. So let's get the shock out and go from there. All right, we have the shocks and springs out of the rear. It's a little bit more of a pain than it should be. Shocks are just basically standard shock, just a upper and lower bolt. The spring was a little difficult because it was just, for me, the tops came out pretty easy. The bottom was stuck on there. So the only way I could really get it out was use a spring compressor. Didn't need to for both sides, just to get the spring a little bit smaller in size. And I already have the T-bar or suspension, whatever you call it, drooping down there. And then I had to pry on the bottom here to get this bottom plastic cup off. So fortunately got them off. It's a bit of a pain, but now we're going to try, I don't know, I was actually debating about maybe throwing the springs on, dropping the car down, not even put the shock on yet, just to see kind of what it does sitting here. I don't know. I might do that just to see, because with these shocks over here, I did have a thought. Do I go kind of with the adjuster all the way to the top, or do I just stick the spring on there? So I don't know. This will give me the absolute lowest possible rear. Interesting to see how the spring is not quite linear, or in the sense that it gets a little wide at the top. But anyway, I don't know. We'll see. I'm kind of thinking just throw the spring in there, drop the car down, see what it looks like, and then go from there. So yeah, maybe we'll do that. As typical fashion, it's starting to get darker in the evening here, so we'll get the rear suspension done, kind of see where it lands us, and then probably tomorrow will be the fine tuning to get it to the exact ride height. But this is what I decided to do. Take the spring with the rubber isolator piece on the factory plastic, whatever you call it, that came with the car. Then I'm going to take just the adjuster ring, because it has the rubber on it, put that on, and then the other factory piece. So this represents what we're going to try right now. So I would say this is the absolute lowest we can go with. If by chance it seems a little too low, then we can always put this piece back on, which would go on here like this. That piece goes in here, and then we have the couple inches of adjustability. But I'm thinking most of those positions are going to be too high. So let's find out. All right, well, the springs are in and the shocks are in back here. There's the mounted up shock, spring hiding back there. You probably really can't see it too well, but definitely brings the arm up quite a bit more. So let's see what happens. Like I said, this is the spring only with the top little rubber piece. And yeah, let's throw some wheels and tires on this thing, drop it down, and see where we're at. All right, well, here we are. Got the back lowered down and move the car back and forth a little. Let the suspension settle. I think it's parked in about the same location. And of course, yes, it's dark. But let's check out what we got. I saw the fronts. Unfortunately, they're probably a little lower than I'd even want. So I hate to say it, but they probably have to come up a little bit. And then the rear's over here. Sorry for the light. I think it's enough to see, but not ideal. Try not to step on everything here. Rear's turned out pretty good. They also might be just a little bit too low. I know they look cool, but this is a street car, and you know, driving around up here in the mountains and everything is not always the best roads. So I don't know. We'll see. There's some limited adjustability since I'm only on springs right now in the back. So I can't just go in there and just do a quick adjustment. But anyway, that's what it looks like. And I do have some measurements over here. So this is what we have. Sorry for the camera and any light issues, but original height, and this is to the top of the fender, how much it lowered, and then what my new measurements. So the rear's 2 1/4, 2 1/8, maybe just a hair more than I was hoping. And then the front's 1 3/4, 1 5/8, definitely more than I really even wanted. So ended up here with left front 24 1/4, 24 3/4 for the 24 1/2, excuse me, left front, right front, 24 3/4. So they're close. I think I want to get them around plus or minus 25 inches. So around a ½ inch up. And then left rear, 25 1/8, 25 1/2. Yeah, I don't know. I'm thinking for now, leave the rears where they're at. The damper settings probably around soft, and I don't have the collar locked for the did I do the rear? I honestly don't remember. So I gotta lock the lock the collars for the adjustments on the shocks. On the rear, put the damper settings kind of in the middle. There's 32-way adjustments, so put them around 16 for now. Fronts, I gotta bring it up, maybe ½ inch or so. Get them relatively level, and then lock in the fronts, adjust the dampers in the fronts too, and then just put a few miles on it. These are old junky tires, so I'm not worried about that. The alignment is good enough to just drive around on. And then see where we're at. Maybe I'll leave it at that. I don't know. I mean, the front is infinitely adjustable. You can do whatever you want. The problem, the rear is, I only have these. Oh, almost lost it. And obviously they're maxed out right now. So I could potentially, this is about, if I put this on, this is about 5/8 higher, maybe almost more than I want. I could potentially take this off and just put the other, I don't know. I can do a couple, I can play around a little bit. So I think the plan is to drive it, see if it settles at all, which it probably will. And then do a final adjustment, get it aligned, and go from there. All right, well, it's the following day, or really the following evening. And I'm going to set the damper adjustment on each shock, damper, whatever. Lock in. That's what these, I'll show you how to do that. And then lock in the adjusters in the back. The front I am going to bring up maybe about a ½ inch. I'm going to take her for a quick drive, make sure everything seems to work okay. No, we're rubbing with normal driving. And then I think we're going to leave that for now. I don't think I'm going to get to the rear sway bar yet. Super basic. It's just, I think, 4 or 6 bolts or something like that. But once again, it's the evening and light and all that fun stuff. But we'll get these fronts adjusted here, the damper settings, and then go from there. All right, so to adjust the shocks on the front struts, damper, shocks, whatever you want to call them, you use this little, basically just an Allen threaded adjuster, and then there's a little rubber piece that I think just keeps it from moving around. So I'll just slide it in like that. Just kind of winging it here, see what happens. Goes down the shock. Push that in. Push down as far as you could go. Okay, it locks in. Okay, I could feel the... Okay, they're definitely all the way at the lightest setting, so I'm going to do 16, I think they're 32-way adjustable, so we're going to do 16, all four corners, and we'll go from there. And I think you can probably just leave these in, but that's all you do, just clicks and go from there. And the last thing for the front coilovers is we're going to bring them down about a ½ inch to in turn raise the car a little bit because she's a little too low. So I didn't lock this one here. So I can loosen this up. And all you really should have to do, and I'm not going to turn it yet because you could just, I'm just going to measure, I don't know, maybe from here to here, something clear distance there. And then you just take the shock body itself and you kind of just twist it. So I'll measure that off. I'll twist those to actually expand it a little bit, which is bringing this down, which in turn getting a little more gap, and then lock this and you're done. All right, so now fronts are done. Now just adjusting the back. Do have to lock the collar down. That's kind of hard to see. Lock the collar down here, and then I don't know if you can see with the light or not. Apologize if you can't, but the adjuster is just the top of the shock. So in the rears, you just loosen or tighten the same thing. I'm going to set them halfway, 16 clicks for now, and then go from there. All right, well, another evening, but we're done. Just took it for a quick spin, came back. Yeah, it rides a little stiffer, but honestly, I'll just showing off the front. Slight raise, can't really tell, but it did come up about ½ inch, and then the back is still pretty much the same, so I don't really need to show that. But yeah, I took it for a quick spin. It rides a little stiffer, like expected, and some rough roads around here. But honestly, it's not much worse than the probably worn out shocks and stress that we're currently on it. So no rubbing, no issues with turning and anything, so I think it's pretty solid. The only thing dimension wise or measurement wise, it's about dead level front to back. There's a bit of, I don't know, 1/8 inch, something like that. Maybe, I think the passenger side was an 1/8 inch high in the back. The driver's side was dead level, so I might actually lower the front just a few turns whenever I take the wheels off again and put new tires and get it aligned, just to make sure it maintains level to maybe the back just a hair high. I don't want the back sagging. So anyway, but close enough. I think we're good. Basically ended up with just over 1 inch in the front lower, and you can infinitely adjust that to whatever you want. And we're about 2 1/4 ish in the rear. Unfortunately, that can't be adjusted because I'm not using the what do you want to call the adjusters on the spring. So you know, that's the only negative really of the whole kit, I would say. Good quality, seems to ride good in my 5 miles I put on it, whatever. The only bummer might be, it's like I almost wish there was an in-between the regular coilovers and the low coilovers, because I'm kind of right at that in between, but whatever, seems to work. So I think that's it for now. Coming up soon, we're gonna do, I didn't do the sway bar in the rear yet. It's dark, I'm not messing with it now. Maybe when I take the wheels and tires off, get the new tires, I'll throw that sway bar on. It should be just a few bolts. It should be pretty straightforward. So I think that's it. Shifter stuff at some point coming up with the short throw, spring and bushings and stuff. We'll do that. Also intercooler and piping and things like, we'll do that. And I think the car's good for a while. at least till the cold weather gets here. But yeah, so that's it for now. So thanks for watching. See you in the next one.